The Victorian mansion on Maple Street had always been my ultimate dream. Since I was a child, I would wander by it, imagining what it would be like to live in its grand towers and ornate rooms. For a decade, I saved every penny, eagerly waiting for the day it would be put up for sale. So when I saw my family's cars parked in the driveway, my heart skipped a beat. My name is Rebecca Chin. I'm 35, and I just discovered that my family had purchased the very house I had been longing for. They knew how much it meant to me. I had been talking about it nonstop ever since the first for sale sign appeared 3 months ago. "Oh, you're here," my sister Amanda called from the porch, waving with exaggerated cheer. "We wanted to surprise you." My parents stood beside her, my father jingling the keys while my mother smiled smugly. Their faces were full of satisfaction, and I knew instantly this wasn't just about buying a beautiful home. This was about one more way to beat me. "Isn't it perfect?" Amanda exclaimed, leading me inside. "When we heard you were thinking of bidding on it, we just had to have it instead. It's way too grand for just you after all." I kept my face impassive as I walked through the rooms I had memorized from the online listing. The original hardwood floors, the carved banisters, the stained glass windows. Every detail I had fallen in love with now belonged to them. "We'll be hosting all the family gatherings here," my mother declared. "Since you never threw proper get-togethers in that tiny apartment of yours." What they didn't know was that I had been a step ahead the entire time. The moment I saw my sister touring the house last month, I realized exactly what they were planning. It was typical of them, turning everything into a competition and then feigning surprise when I was upset about losing. But this time I hadn't lost. While they were busy fighting over my dream house, I had quietly closed on Riverside Manor, the even larger, more historic mansion next door. Renovations were already underway, turning it into something that would make the Victorian seem modest by comparison. "It must have been quite expensive," I said casually, watching their reactions. "The market's incredibly competitive right now." "Oh, we managed," my father said, swelling with pride. "Some of us know how to handle money properly, unlike those who waste it on education." His jab at my PhD didn't bother me as much as it used to. My wasted education had led to a successful research career, one that had earned me more than they could comprehend. While they saw me as the family disappointment, unmarried, childless, focused on work, I had been quietly building a life that would have surprised them. "Well, it's lovely," I said, heading for the door. "I should be going. I have some moving arrangements to make." "Moving?" Amanda's eyebrows shot up. "Are you finally leaving that rundown apartment?" I smiled. "Something like that. I'll see you soon, though. We'll be neighbors after all." I walked out, leaving them standing there, puzzled, savoring the knowledge of what was to come. In 2 weeks, the moving trucks would arrive at Riverside Manor, and my family would realize that their plan to one-up me had spectacularly backfired. But for now, I had contractors to meet and renovations to oversee. The wine cellar needed updating, and the ballroom's chandeliers were being restored to their original splendor. My family had always underestimated me, seeing me as competition instead of family. They were about to learn that while they were playing checkers, I had been playing chess all along. 2 weeks later, I stood in the newly renovated foyer at Riverside Manor, watching through the grand windows as the moving trucks arrived, right on schedule. My sister Amanda appeared on her porch, coffee in hand, curiosity written all over her face. I smiled, knowing the show was about to begin. The movers started unloading high-end furniture, antiques I had carefully collected, and artwork that would make my mother's reproductions look cheap. Each item had been chosen to tell a story, the story of my success. While my family had been focused on trying to undermine me, Miss Chin, one of the movers asked, holding a clipboard, "Where would you like the grand piano? The music room or the ballroom?" I saw Amanda freeze, her coffee cup suspended in midair. "The ballroom," I replied. My family's Victorian had many lovely features, but a ballroom was not one of them. "The music room for now," I added. "The ballroom chandeliers are still being restored." Within the hour, my parents' car screeched into their driveway. It was clear they had received Amanda's urgent call. I continued directing the movers, pretending not to notice as my family gathered on their porch, watching the procession of luxury items being moved into Riverside Manor. "Rebecca," my mother called across the lawn. "What's going on?" I turned, feigning surprise. "Oh, hello, just moving into my new home. Would you like a tour?" They followed me inside, their faces growing increasingly pale as they took in the grand staircase, the original moldings, the hand-painted ceiling murals. Every room was larger, every feature more impressive than the Victorian. "But how?" Amanda stammered. "You couldn't afford." "Actually," I interjected smoothly, "I could. While you thought I was struggling in my little apartment, I was investing, saving, and building my portfolio. Did you really think I was living below my means because I had to?" My father's face turned a deep shade of red. "You let us believe." "I let you believe whatever you wanted," I replied. "Just like you let me believe you cared about my dreams when you outbid me on the Victorian." I smiled. Fair is fair. I led them through the house, past the library with its 2-story bookshelves, through the conservatory with its rare plants, into the state-of-the-art kitchen that made their gourmet setup look outdated. "And over here," I said, flinging open a set of double doors, "is the ballroom where I'll be hosting our family's annual Christmas party this year. I trust that won't be an issue." My mother gasped, clutching her pearls. "But we've always hosted Christmas." "Well, things evolve," I said with a smile. "Besides, my ballroom actually has enough space for the whole family. No more squeezing everyone in." As they stood there, unable to respond, my phone buzzed. "Excuse me," I said, glancing at the screen. "That's probably the interior designer, just finalizing plans for the rooftop garden." "A rooftop garden?" Amanda's voice pitched up, disbelieving. "Yes," I answered casually. "The view of your house from up there is rather charming. You can see right into your backyard." Shortly after, they left, huddling together and muttering in a frenzy. Through my windows, I watched them return to their Victorian, once the house they bought to spite me, now outshined in both size and stature by Riverside Manor. Later that evening, as I relaxed in my library with a glass of wine, the texts began to pour in. First, "Amanda, you had this plan, didn't you?" Then my mother, "We need to discuss Christmas plans." Finally, my father, "We need to have a talk about your investments." I ignored them all. For years, every family event had felt like a competition, with my achievements treated as something to be overcome. Now they'd have to live next door to a daily reminder of their epic miscalculation. The next morning, I hired a landscaping company to start work on my gardens. The noise would begin early, very early, and would carry on for weeks. Sometimes karma comes with the sound of power tools. Welcome to the neighborhood, family, I thought. Let the games begin. 2 months later, I hosted my first garden party at Riverside Manor, a dazzling event that showed off everything my property had to offer. My family stood in their considerably smaller yard, watching as caterers set up elegant tables beneath imported parasols and string musicians positioned themselves near the fountain. "Isn't this a bit much?" my mother asked when they finally joined, unable to resist the pull of the party they hadn't been invited to plan. "Not at all," I replied, accepting a champagne flute from a passing server. "Just a proper way to introduce myself to the neighbors." The guest list was carefully chosen. Local business leaders, university colleagues, and a few real estate developers who couldn't stop commenting on how Riverside Manor was elevating property values in the area. My family's Victorian, while still charming, was now considered the underwhelming property on the block. Amanda cornered me by the rose garden. "Was this your plan all along? To make us look foolish?" "No," I answered honestly. "My plan was simply to buy my dream home. You all turned it into a competition. I just played by your rules for once." The party was a tremendous success, cementing my status as the new social hub of the neighborhood. My family's attempts to host competing events at their Victorian fizzled. No one could top the grandeur of Riverside Manor's ballroom and gardens. 6 months later, my father showed up at my door. "We're considering selling," he admitted, his tone gruff. "The upkeep is costing more than we expected." I nodded sympathetically. Victorian homes can be quite expensive to maintain, though I've heard property values have gone up quite a bit since I renovated Riverside Manor. He shifted uncomfortably. "Yes? Well, we thought you might be interested in buying it. Keep it in the family." "Why would I want a smaller house?" I asked innocently. "Besides, I'm quite enjoying watching you all adjust to the consequences of your choices." They didn't sell. Their pride wouldn't allow it. Instead, they were forced to live with the reality they had created. Every family gathering at my house reminded them of how their attempt to outdo me had backfired. Each upgrade I made to Riverside Manor made their Victorian look just a little more outdated. That Christmas was particularly satisfying. The ballroom, decorated beautifully, hosted our entire extended family with ease. Cousins who had once echoed my parents' criticisms now asked for advice on investments and career strategies. As I watched my parents navigate the party, looking small in the grand space they never imagined I could own, I felt no triumph, just quiet satisfaction. They had spent years trying to prove they were better than me. In the end, they had only competed with themselves. "Your house is extraordinary," my Aunt Sarah said as she found me by the Christmas tree. "Though I wonder if it's a bit lonely. So much space for just one person." I smiled, thinking of the research center I was planning to build in the East Wing. "Not lonely at all," I said. "I've filled it with exactly what I want. Just like I've filled my life with what I want, not what others think I should." My family still lives next door in their Victorian, a constant reminder that sometimes the best revenge isn't about revenge at all. It's about rising above. They wanted to teach me a lesson about my place in the world. Instead, they learned one about underestimating me. As for me, I host charity events in my ballroom, write research papers in my library, and enjoy my rooftop garden with its perfect view of their much smaller house. Sometimes I see them watching from their windows as I entertain or improve my property. Let them watch. They spent years treating me as competition. Now they get to live with a constant reminder that they lost a game they never should have started.